Hi, I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for our Humanities team. And this program is called Human Consciousness Shift. In today's world, many are feeling and experiencing the conscious shift of humanity in all areas of their life. In this panel, we'll use as a basis for the discussion the 12 around 1 model of Barbara Marx Hubbard, a powerful representation of the whole system shift. The 12 societal spheres comprise the full list of basic functions of any community. This panel will talk about the global movement that is currently transitioning our communities and ultimately our world towards societal systems aligned with universal values that bring unity and harmony to humanity and that serve the flourishing of all of life. Please welcome Barbara Marx Hubbard, Barnet, Bain, Joan Borysenko, and Barbara Fields to the Human Consciousness Shift panel. I'm going to briefly introduce them one at a time now, and then we'll go right to panel discussion. Barbara Marx Hubbard has been called the voice for conscious evolution, and many would agree. She is the global ambassador for conscious change. At her heart, Barbara Marx Hubbard is a visionary and social innovator. She is an evolutionary thinker who believes that global change happens when we work collectively and selflessly for the greater good. As a prolific author and educator, Barbara has written 7 books on social and planetary evolution. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm coming to you from Switzerland.
Indeed, and great to have you with us. And we'll refer to Barbara Marx Hubbard as B1. And Barnet Bain is a Canadian filmmaker, author, and educator. Select film credits include Milton's Secret, Oscar winner What Dreams May Come, Emmy Award nominee, Outstanding TV movie, Homeless to Harvard, and The Celestine Prophecy. Barnet consults and trains business leaders and private clients who are committed to high performance. Through his creativity workshops, Barnet guides people of all ages and walks of life to expand their vision of what is possible and develop their gifts and talents with passion. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Barnet.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to see so many of my friends scattered all over the world. I'm talking about my co-panelists. It's such a pleasure to see you all.
Awesome. Great to have you, Barnet. Thanks for being here. And Joan Borysenko is a pioneer in integrative medicine, is a world-renowned expert in the mind-body connection. Her work has been foundational in an international healthcare revolution that recognizes the role of meaning and the spiritual dimensions of life as an integral part of health and healing. Joan is a credible bridge between faith and reason. Her brilliance, humor, and authenticity in combination with the latest research make her a compelling and inspiring speaker and writer. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Joan.
Hi there, Steve. Hi there, panel. And hi there, listeners, watchers. I'm really glad to be here.
Okay, Joan, and great to have you. And Barbara Fields is the Executive Director of the Association for Global New Thought and co-founder and project director of the Gandhi King Chavez Season for Nonviolence from 1998 to present. With her numerous credits, awards, and honors, Barbara is working and loving from a place of true and pure authenticity, which catalyzes a state of grace beyond linear explanation. She stands as the co-creative edge of spirituality and humanity's evolution. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Barbara, B2.
Thank you. That felt really good. It's really great to see everybody.
All right. Well, it's great to be with you all. My privilege and pleasure. So we're going to just jump right in because there's so much that we want to cover in the hour. When you respond to questions, feel free, panel, to respond to the panel discussion in addition to the questions that I ask, because we want to make sure that we're hearing from you what you most want to share. And Barbara Marx Hubbard, I'm going to go to you first, if I may. You once asked President Eisenhower, what do you think is the meaning of American power that is good? And what's your vision to the answer to that question now?
Well, I asked him that after we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. And it was the shocking realization that humanity had gained powers we used to attribute to gods. And since I was an innately hopeful 15-year-old at the time of the bomb, by the time I met Eisenhower, it was 1953, he'd just become president. And I'd been asking in the church, I'd been asking at Bryn Mawr College, and the question I asked was, well, what is the meaning of this new power of humanity that's good? And President Eisenhower looked at me, shook his head, and said, I have no idea. And that occurred to me, well, we better find out. In some deep sense, my whole life has been a quest of that journey. And I think I discovered it most from Teilhard de Chardin, that evolution is a process of continual rise of consciousness, expanded freedom, and more complex and loving order, from single cells to us. And that every human being is impelled by that impulse. And we are right now at the threshold of a devolutionary breakdown, but we're also rising ever faster toward people wanting to give their gift, to be creative, like Barnet is talking about. And so the creativity is mounting. And I really believe that the meaning of our new power is the development of a new species, of a new humanity, which we're calling Homo Universalis, spiritually, socially, scientifically, and technologically.
All right, what a great way to start the panel. We're going to certainly go down into that discussion here. But Barnet, let me come over to you. You've shared that we've entered the age of consciousness and that we've exited this information age, which is very intriguing because that says a lot about the time that we live in. Can you expand on that?
Oh, definitely. Well, in the 90s and the 2000s, it was information that produced power and its primary driver, profitability. So I think that access to data, especially data that can be extrapolated logically, Microsoft, Apple, Google, et cetera, these were the power centers. These were the ivory towers of the information age. Before that, it was industry, trade of goods and services, and before that, it was land ownership, and before that, tribal affiliations. I think in the new world already dawning, value is based in consciousness. We'll meet the challenges of a world becoming new, challenges with too few linear solutions, by awakening a personal awareness of what I see it as a cat's cradle of thought and belief and choice and decision and attitude and feelings, AKA psychologies that hold the boundary of what is possible for us to conceive and perceive. So in other words, as we expand consciousness, the worlds within and around us represent in new and expansive ways. Companies, for example, and individuals are already beginning to measure their success on how they embrace consciousness. And I think we'll increasingly become partners with nature. We'll add love and intimacy and caring to everything we do. We'll seek a partnership with self and greater understanding of self. And this will truly be the beginning of a new world. Consciousness will become a more vivid component in every matter of life. Nothing has ever been as exciting. Yes, consciousness is a red-hot commodity.
Yes, it is. Well, intriguing that there's a lot more to be said about that. I'm sure we'll be coming back to it. And by the way, I'm going to just do this after you all speak, that everything that you all share is quite profound, and I don't want to waste the time of this panel with my musings. So you might just see me do this after you all share. Joan, I'm going to come over to you, if I may. At a recent talk that you gave, you spoke about the spiritual art of memoir, discovering the invisible thread of grace. And can you just share some of your wisdom from that talk?
We know there's an old Navajo teaching tale, and what it says is that when you look at your life, it's like a Navajo rug, a weaving. And if you're looking up at it, what you see is little strings hanging down, and it's not so pretty. It's only when you rise above the rug and look down on it from below that you begin to see the patterns. And that also happens with our brain and with our lives, that as we age, especially I'm sure that many people watching can relate to this, as you get older, like nouns drop out of your mind, you can't remember your best friend's name. But what develops is pattern recognition, and you begin to see the tapestry of your own life from an increasingly higher perspective. And that's what the art of memoir is all about, is extracting meanings from these threads of various colors. And when I give a program like that, we look at our life like a river as a metaphor and look down. There are places where the river is calm. There are places where there are rapids. There are angels and sacred enemies we meet along the way. And time for reflection on what the pattern of your life is like allows you to hold the highest vision for yourself and for the world. Because here's the truth and the scientific truth. We really are all one. There's just one of us here. And when we think about what can we do to make life better for all, it's to hold our own story and the story of other people in the highest perspective. And in so doing, we find that invisible thread of grace and relate to that instead of the difficulties, the problems, the times when things went wrong. And we learn to forgive ourselves and others. And that just spreads out through consciousness, since we're all part of the same consciousness. So I do believe that in all times, in terms of our personal lives, and in terms of the planet, there's always an invisible thread of grace, even in the most difficult times. And it takes a little perspective to find it, Steve.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joan. And Barbara, last and definitely not least, Barbara Fields, so this is B2. Of course, I want to just talk about spiritually guided social activism, because this term was pioneered by the Association for Global New Thought, as you know, and it's such a powerful term. Can you just share a little bit about this, including the history of this?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'd love to. I like to use this notion of, most people are familiar with the word icon, and it usually refers to a piece of religious art or an artifact that has a kind of an alchemical power, because it's meant to be the interface between the great field of ineffable, unbounded oneness with the divine and the world of material reality, of which we in our experience are a part. So in this great unified field of oneness, we run right into the arms of duality, because our experience every day is one of sensory experience and the idea of acting and the idea of becoming. It's a dynamic principle instead of a static principle. And iconography in the artistic sense of the word is a kind of portal so that we may experience the interface of the material world with that divine oneness. So I like to think that spiritually guided social activism is referring to a new activist, which is an icon in action. We have consciously the notion of agency, and as individuals expressing our passion and our purpose on the planet, we have not just the ability, but almost a responsibility to become that, expressing through our individual vehicle, as if we ourselves expressing are a portal that is going in the other direction. We are outpicturing the divine in the world, because that's in fact the only way through our projects and programs and innovations and revolutions It's actually the only way that social evolution actually occurs, because we are the agents and we are the vehicles. And if not us, then who? We are the ones we have been waiting for. So this idea of socially guided, spiritually guided social activism, to me, is all about knowing our true nature, individuating that, and expressing the divine through and as ourselves.
Yes, and I love that. I'm surprised the term didn't surface decades or millennia ago, because it's so accurately, as you're sharing, describes reality as spiritually motivated social activism, because of course we're spiritual beings. So, but beautiful. Anyway, thank you. I'm going to come back to you here shortly, Barbara V2, and B1, Barbara. B1, coming over to you again. You travel the world, of course, and talk about the human consciousness shift. How do you describe that for people, and how do you share that they can participate? And if you want to bring in this awaken call to action, feel free to do that as well.
Well, I feel very much close to what B2, Barbara Fields, is saying, that the inner impulse of creativity is truly the source of creation, creating through you, as you, and with you. And what I'm noticing about the rise of conscious activism and consciousness in general is people are turned on vocationally. They're turned on creatively. They're experiencing vocational arousal. And vocational arousal is nature's way to get us to join genius, as well as to join genes to have the babies. And you've heard me say, joining genius to give birth to the new person that you are and the new work that you can do in the world. And it's a love affair. So another thing that's happening out of the consciousness movement is a rise of a kind of love that is juicy, and the rise of eros as the impulse of evolution itself, creating as you. Now, I also will say that you start to feel newer rather than older or younger. And I'm here in Switzerland with lots of people. I'm always the oldest that anybody's ever seen around. Today, a Mayan shaman gave me a shamanic treatment. He saw this huge white body arising out of me, going into my consciousness. So I want you to know that tonight, this is the first showing of this new white body going up into the light. I mention it because this is the way things are going. And I'll just say a last word, that I believe crisis precedes transformation. I think our crisis is a birth of a new humanity. And we are the fortunate generation to be living exactly on the mark when this new generation is emerging everywhere and nowhere in existing leadership. We're not the head of a country, the head of a corporation. Usually we're not the head of a university. So we're changing all the systems in the world to reflect this consciousness of creativity, love, oneness, and the epiphany of the gorgeous possibility of humanity with its innovations connected.
So Barbara, how can people participate? That's beautiful.
Oh, well, I have, because I've had this intuition for some time, it has occurred to me that we're becoming a new species. Now that's pretty radical. If you think of Homo erectus, Homo neanderthal, Homo sapiens sapiens, here's my intuition. It came with the great spiritual leaders of the past, the Buddhas, the Christs, the Teilhard, Aurobindo, all our very great favorites. But what's happened now is that new leadership is coming out in countless ones of us to be a real expanded creativity, and I'm placing it in the context of our new high-tech powers. And that's what the question with Eisenhower is, what's the meaning of our new power? I meant science, technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing, space travel. These are powers of ancient gods. With this increased spirituality and vocational arousal and a crisis on Earth that could lead to devolution, So a new species is waking up. And I'm very thrilled to say that we're partnering with Humanities Team, and by your invitation, Steve, to do a year-long quest of connecting the awakening species. I don't think we've ever come together as that at the threshold of devolution or evolution with the creativity of the kind of thing that Barnet is speaking about. It should be something where we can amplify creativity as never before. And the young people are born either into a devolving world or in a rapidly evolving world. And so we're all going for that evolutionary impulse, and it brings joy. It brings love. And no matter what happens, you're fully engaged in giving your best for the shift.
Let's just talk about this here on the panel. We've got these questions I want to come back to, but this whole, as we can see around the world, certainly in the US with our administration, but many other countries as well, we're being nudged to action would be a gentle way to describe it, to really come down on the field, to self-select, to step into this next evolution, what Barbara's calling Homo Universalis. Let's just talk a little bit about that. Barbara Fields, can I come to you just to chat about that? What do you see? AG&T, of course, is worldwide, and you've got this presence all over the world. What are you seeing here?
I thought you were going to ask me a hard question. Yeah, well, it's interesting because, you talked about AG&T, and we've realized recently that since we've always existed as kind of a conglomeration of amicable but separate organizations under the banner of New Thought, recently we've brought all the leadership from all the different organizations on board to our board, and have made the decision to become a unified movement that espouses New Thought principles, along with all of you and all the many people who really are in this stream of thinking, regardless of what we call it, because those labels and affiliations aren't so helpful at this point in history. It's a kind of a 3.0 model, and it's hyper-democratic, and it must be hyper-inclusive as well. But we need the ability, and of course I'm, known as the agenda police or the queen of logistics to many. What we realize now is that by unifying, we have a chance of being able to communicate with some efficacy among many, many like-minded organizations at the same time. We've got the technology, and we've got the willingness, and we certainly have the crisis to respond to. So my feeling at this point is that we have to become a little bit more disciplined and rigorous about the systems by which we structure the mechanical part of our communications, because the content is there. We've just, like the Democratic Party, we've been a little bit loose about our logistics.
Okay, beautiful. I like that. Hyper-inclusive, hyper-democratic. I like that. Barnet and then Joan, just the same question. We're being catalyzed to something here. I'm sure this human consciousness shift is coming in. What do you see?
Well, we're certainly being catalyzed. It's very clear that our old responses to the challenges of living are ineffective. And, as I see it, in the same way that the way a rose blooms, there is a discontinuous developmental experience between the blooming of a rose and the state of being a calyx or a stem or a root. These things happen, and then all of a sudden they appear to be linear, and then all of a sudden there's this discontinuous birthing of something that is fundamentally new. So we are in the process of both birthing and being birthed into something fundamentally new. And first, I believe, comes the humility of recognizing that strategies for success that worked for all of us to the greater and lesser degree at earlier parts of our lives when we functioned as lesser selves, not less than selves, just lesser in terms of the awareness of our personal conscious responsibility, our ability to respond, that we can now begin to understand that those aspects of ourselves can do with reparenting, and there is an opportunity to acknowledge and accept and love those aspects of self that have been trained and developed an approach to life that is no longer effective, and those aspects we hear from in continuous interruptions, moment to moment. Why not? And yes, but, and I can't, and why won't, and not enough, and this won't happen. So as we begin to become intimate with these, this mind stream from the past, we likewise can become intimate, develop an intimacy with a greater and expanded sense of response to life, to working in partnership with not only co-creators, friends, but also aspects of the self, of consciousness, of energies beyond. There are new tools, new skills. All of our audience, all of our listeners are well schooled in many of these practices, and we begin to put more attention on those and less attention on following the lead of our conditioned responses to life, and substituting, instead of following the lead of those, becoming more responsive and more compassionate about where those hauntings of the past are coming from, both as a process of becoming intimate with all of my various aspects of internal self, and likewise all the various versions of my so-called external self. You know, as Barbara said, Joan said, there is only one consciousness going on here, and that is a fundamentally challenging assumption, a bridge to cross for so much of how we have been wired.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, of course, we're right in the theme of Global Oneness Day here. And thank you for just each of you bringing this theme in so clearly and succinctly, that we're all emanations of this one thing. And humanities team, we call it the divine. But of course, there are many things that we can call this one thing. And Joan, Borysenko, over to you on these contemporary times. What's happening now?
Well, the sense I have, it's a very uncomfortable sense, is that we're often speaking to the choir. And what I think we're being catalyzed toward is really looking at a variety of points of view and understanding who people are and what their ideas and beliefs are, even when they're very fundamentally different from our own. My husband, Gordy, several of you, Gordon DeVeran, taught me a little bit about Plato, and a concept of Plato's called thymos. And what that is the hunger for recognition, to be seen, to be understood, and to be valued. And that's the one thing, it turns out, that people are most willing to die for and give up everything for that. And often what we wonder is why politically people would vote against their own self-interest. And I think the reason is that they have a greater self-interest in terms of self-respect. And as somebody in the field of healthcare and prevention, I keep thinking, how can we reach people, for example, who might consider ideas about eating better, even if they have the means to do so, might consider that elitist. and actually not do it because their idea of preserving their own way of being is most important. So I'm looking for ways to do that, to talk outside of the box, to talk outside of the choir, to see what it is, how we can approach people within the life that they want to lead. And within that, to say, here are ways to lead it better. So I guess another way of saying that is, I think diversity is much more important than homogeneity in any way. I know we all think that. But it's easy for me, just in the field of healthcare, to tailor my remarks to people who know what it is to have enough folate in their diet, who are interested in epigenetics, who know about processed food. And I'm thinking, how do we reach other people? And that for me is what is being catalyzed, the need for recognition of many different people, even if their beliefs are very different than our own.
Fabulous. That's really speaking to people from where they sit, huh? Joan, yeah, and just inviting in their diverse perspective, their diverse self-selection process. Yeah, love that. Okay, I'm going to go back to focus questions here. We're kind of just moving. I thought it might be fun to sort of do something panel-wide and then come back to some of these focus questions. In this next one, Barbara Marx Hubbard, V1 is for you. You are known, as I said in the introduction, as an American visionary, and recently there has been a documentary about your life's work at the Illuminate Film Festival entitled American Visionary. Can you share a little bit about this work for our viewers?
Well, it was done by a wonderful young woman on her own, Karen Everett, who gave her life to do this, raised the money for it, and carrying it out. And I went to see it. It has won a prize, and I became aware that I'd like to use this film as raising a question to Americans as well as people in the world. What is the meaning of American power that's good? It's really a great question. And I'll just say that when I was a young woman, I asked my father what religion we were because he was agnostic everything. And he said to me, Barbara, you're an American. Do your best. I grew up with the idea that America was my vision. And I actually love the idea in some deep way because all people are born creative. I have a new Thomas Jefferson now. All people are born creative, endowed by our Creator with the inalienable right and responsibility to accept and express our creativity for the good of the self and the whole. So I would like to see the question asked, what is the meaning of American power that's good? We have so much power and we are not using it in what I think is the true meaning of America, is the liberation of creativity, individuality, a vision of the new. And, I've had a few little efforts in politics myself. I ran to be selected as a vice presidential nominee on the Democratic ticket. And I actually was the other woman nominated. And I mentioned that because I asked, at 6:30 a.m. in South Dakota caucus, who never heard of me before, to vote for me for vice president. How would that be? I said, I want to stand here at the platform of the Democratic Party and speak for the potential of finding out what's working and connecting the creative in the world. And they were so excited that they nominated me. It was to horrify the Democratic Party. And I gave my votes to Geraldine Ferraro. I didn't expect to be vice president. But I think Americans have to be visionary again about what we feel is possible, and that everybody in the world in that sense is included that created America, everybody. So America is not just people who happen to live here now, it's the spirit of creativity, love, and innovation, and being adventuresome with your life.
And indeed, it's spread all over the world, isn't it? So it is a powerful question. And I love that it's what launched you on your life journey Barbara, from the Oval Office of the White House. My God.
Yeah. And I'd say one last thing there is that I think there's an evolution of democracy itself that Americans as well as others are working on, which is mainly the connecting of that which is creative, synergistic democracy, where it's not win-lose voting, but it's sharing needs and resources. And that's why the wheel of co-creation is coming through loud and clear all over the place. And I'm here in Europe now, and there's interest in using the wheel of co-creation for a movement to unify cultures in Europe, coming together in a wheel. And I think we might actually find that it's useful at a large-scale political effort if we keep on going. So that's the last thought here, that the spirit of America it's possible to do what is most creative and best and fulfilling for you. And I think it's a world spirit now.
Amen to that. And as we talk about most creative, Barnet, I'm going to come over to you because, of course, this I mentioned in your introduction, this is where you're training leaders. And in your book, this book called The Book of Doing and Being, you ask the reader to discover their CQ or creativity quotient. Can you explain what a CQ is for our viewers and just other, maybe key messages that you like to get to when you talk about becoming a creative or developing your creative potential?
Well, CQ is haunting me. It was never meant to haunt me, but I'll develop it a little bit. We all know about IQ, which is a numerical score based on standardized tests that measures our cognitive strengths. And yet there's much more to us than logic and reason alone. Walt Whitman, the great poet, wrote, "I am large, I contain multitudes." And I believe he was referring to intelligences, many beyond logic and reason, which is the favored metric of conventional wisdom. But who knows, there are possibly infinite expressions of self beyond rational understanding. And those would certainly include sensing and intuiting and being and knowing, which I refer to as CQ, the creativity quotient. So we're really talking about gifts and talents that are keys to a broader ability to perceive and conceive. The creativity quotient is, it's more of a playful idea. It was not meant to be a metric or to be taken. I'm surprised it's been taken so seriously. It was meant to point to an area of talents and abilities beyond logic and reason. My publisher had asked me to develop a quiz to clarify the territory, and it's kind of taken off. But would you like an example of the kinds of questioning that one would pursue?
Yeah, please.
So, choose A or B. A friend tells you about a personal crisis. A, you look for solutions to fix the problem. Or B, you listen attentively with empathy. So now neither answer is right or wrong, better or worse, but these kinds of questions can provide insight into our habitual or default responses to life. And from that can come choice. If you'd like to take the whole quiz, it's available on my website as a gift, barnetbain.com. But I think enough said about the creativity quotient. I wouldn't want the notion that there is such a thing as a creativity quotient to be the takeaway from this, because the point is that we have a disposition to parse out, to slice and dice and label so much of life's experience. And that very, very parsing, that love affair we have with the straight line and with logic and reason, is I wanted to make a distinction between that tendency and a whole unlimited, a whole unexplored, largely unexplored set of talents and abilities and gifts that are nonlinear and do not involve quantifying. That's the creativity quotient.
Okay, thank you, Barnet. And Joan, I want to come over to you to just, how can a person use their soul's compass to guide them on a path where the inner and the outer become one?
Largely, Steve, I think it's a matter of paying attention to the feedback that life gives you. That when you're using your soul's compass, and as you know, let me just go back in time for a moment. You asked that question because my husband, Gordon DeVaron, and I wrote an entire book called Your Soul's Compass. And the subtitle is, What is Spiritual Guidance? Is there such a thing? Is there a larger intelligence acting through us with which we co-create? And how do we know if we're on the right path or we're just in service to our own ego? That's really the big question. And Gordy and I interviewed 27 sages, males and females, as much as we could find both, from a variety of spiritual traditions, and asked these 12 questions about guidance. And I want to highlight, in answer to your question, how do we know if our soul's compass is headed north or whether it's deflected by the ego? I want to talk a little bit about Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, because one question, we asked 12 questions to all the sages, but one that we got a lot of very interesting response to is, how do you know the difference between your ego needs and desires, your unconscious conditioning, and the voice of a larger intelligence? Reb Zalman, first of all, reminded us it's not so easy. You have to pay close attention. He said, really, how do you tell the difference? He said, if you can tell me, I'll become your disciple. And what he meant by that is, really, it requires meticulous feedback and stepping back to answer that question. And he came out in favor of what he calls, Reb Zalman died a couple of years ago, but Reb Zalman said what we need is togethering, because oftentimes it takes more than one of us to answer this question. And sometimes togethering doesn't work that well either, because we form a we that still is diluted. But the idea of togethering is very interesting. For example, we're approaching now the time of the Jewish high holy days, between Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year, and Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And the point of it is to really look back over the year that just happened and to really think about your soul's compass. What did I do that created life? What did I do that created love? Where was I not able to forgive? What have I learned? And what Zalman always did in this 10-day period, called the Days of Awe between these two holidays, is he'd gather his friends around him and he'd say, this is the time for feedback and being truthful. Where was I off the mark? And I think that's a, pun intended, remarkable thing to say, because so many of us want to avoid and deny the places where we are off the mark, because we haven't taken the time to reflect, to look at our lives, and to recognize, well, everybody makes mistakes. Not even the space shuttle can make it to the moon in a straight line. We all go like this. So where am I? So that was my first comment. We have to be able to look at our lives, reflect, look at the feedback, and largely look at what are the actual results that we are seeing in our life. That's really important too. Have we created more love? Have we created more harmony? Have we created whatever it is that we've given ourselves to? So it was a longish answer, but there you have it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joan. Barbara Fields, I'm going to just come over to you here. We need a vision for a society governed by love, where compassion rules over competition. How can conflict between individuals, groups, and nations steeped in misunderstanding and distrust achieve this vision for today's society?
Well, my goal coming into this call was to solve all the world's problems before we were finished in this hour. AG&T has just launched a new website called agnt.today. And one of the features of our work going forward is that we've developed a kind of a matrix system so that we could identify the domains in which we need to be looking specifically for evolution, and also the processes or stages by which we might achieve that. So this is working into the mechanics, the architecture of the problem. Obviously, we want a world without violence. We want a world that embraces the earth and all of its family. Then there's this idea of serving humanity. We have to be there for one another in times of need, in times of crisis. And there's a big undercurrent that has to do with interfaith and intercultural understanding or celebration. And in the midst of that, we have to be working at the local, national, global level at the same time. One of the things that we've developed is an omni-local model, because when you ask yourself the question, what is global? The answer is local everywhere at once. So we have to look at the challenges, the values, methodology, outcomes, and I can't go into all the topics right now. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my throat right now. But if people will visit agnt.today, they can see the free programming that we're offering. Oops.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and feel free, Barbara, to come back. Boy, doesn't that happen to us all. So anything more that you would like to say? I want to make sure we're not cutting you short here.
Well, no, I think not. I won't at this time.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's. I've got a little segue here at the end of this, where I kind of talk about the next panel and a few things. But let's just go around the panel and give. There's a lot of ground we've covered here, right? We've really, human consciousness shift kind of in the center. We've spent some time, and then we've gone out to some of the outer dimensions of what that might mean and what is happening on the planet. So I'm guessing that this has left each of us with some food for thought of some specific things, maybe that we want to come back to as a call to action or invitation or whatever. So, can we each take about 2 minutes to just share our call to action or invitation, some summation, something that you'd like to just go a little deeper on before we close this panel. And also in that 2 minutes, can you be sure to share a web address where people can go to follow your work? And Barnet, can we start with you?
Absolutely. I recently made a film about bullying. And in the process of doing that work, I came to understand for myself that bullying, while we're very familiar with the overt expression of bullying, that bullying begins, it originates with with bullying internal self-talk. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not loved enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. And there's a whole menu of this self-talk that comes from the outside, is accepted and reinforced and reinforced, and then eventually it emerges out in the world, on the playground and equally in the boardroom. And so my encouragement to my community, my friends, to those listening, is that we all always do discouraging internal self-talk, and to be aware of the messages, and to create just enough distance and enough of a witnessing faculty so that one can remind ourselves that this is not a crisis. Very rarely is it indeed a crisis. If your life is on the line in that moment, it's not a crisis. And so we have the ability to respond. That almost always these are iterations of old feelings and not about now. And that I'm not bad or defective, and I never was. And finally, this is the summation, the superseding takeaway of all these three, is that I will not abandon myself when I most need my own support. What goes on in the world, whatever actions and whatever contributions and service we can make in support of others, cannot be, there can be no greater love expressed out in the world than it's first expressed toward the self. So I just encourage everyone listening to be more aware of themselves and more self-loving in that way.
Yeah, an important message. Thank you, Barnet. And so we got about 90 seconds. And Joan, Borysenko, and then B1 and then B2.
What I wanted to say is B2. I loved your definition of global as local, everywhere at once. And what I think about when I think about this, I was reflecting, what's my own vision? Not the kind of vision of like, well, I hope for world peace, because that's not going to get you anywhere. For all of us, the specificity of vision is actually what makes things happen. That really deep intention and a specific intention, not so much as something you want to do this year, but let's see, if it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, what can you do Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock that helps bring your vision into manifestation and actually bring things down to that level? Because otherwise, not a whole lot happens. Life has a way of coming in and sweeping away the vision. But the more specific the vision for each one of us, the better we act locally. Barnet, I just gave a weekend workshop on your vision, and that is, how do we treat ourselves more kindly? Because if we want a compassionate world, it begins with us. So if that's your vision, how do you break it down? When something goes wrong, what's your approach to it? If somebody asks you to do something and with every bone in your body the answer is no, but you say yes anyhow, and you take from yourself to give away something else when it's really not called for in the moment. That's the kind of specificity I'm talking about, to look at maybe one aspect of a behavior like that, and with the intention to become aware of it. Or in my case, my field is healthcare. And there are a whole lot of visions that I have for this year, but the first one starts this Wednesday with a program on self-caring that we're giving because, and I know I have to be short here, you cannot help anyone else if there's no strength inside of you. We have to put ourselves first, and we have to learn how to calm down our amygdala so that our goal-setting mind can get in there and make a difference. And if you want to know more about that, go to my website. It's just my name, joanborysenko.com. And there's some good tools and techniques that we have to help people help themselves and help others.
Thank you, Joan. And Barbara, B1 to you, and then B2 to you. Yeah, and if we can just do maybe 45 seconds each, that'd be perfect.
Out what's new in people, asking you, is there anything new in you, Steve, in Barnet, and B2, and Joan, in myself, and offering a year-long journey called Awakening the New Species Within You on Humanities Team Partnership, such that by the next Global Awakening and Global Oneness Day 2018, I would like to see a celebration of the emerging humanity. So we would catch a glimpse of what's actually emerging out of a species that is either threatening its life or evolving radically new. So I'm standing up for the new, and I hope people will go to Humanities Team. You have the website there for people to sign up to get a free book of mine called Evolutionary Synthesis, and to join the field of emergence for our species for the next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara, B1, and thank you for coming in from Europe here at the late hour. And B2, just in 30 seconds or so, yeah.
Very brief. First of all, I hope people will check out the new website, agnt.today, because we're launching our big new membership campaign this month. And just as Joan was saying the word kind, into my mind was coming this idea that I was thinking about when the Dalai Lama is asked what is his religion. Obviously, he's a Buddhist, but his wonderful answer to that is, my religion is simple, my religion is kindness. And at the bottom line, to me, this is actually the basis of everything. If you can just remember to be kind in every moment and every choice and every person and every encounter, you really can't go very far wrong, because the universe guides you from there. Your own heart guides you from there. And I feel so strongly about this because it works about 110% of the time. So that's the thought I would like to end my own contribution on. And thank you for this opportunity to participate today.
Okay, thank you, Barbara Fields. Wow, so big thank you to Barbara Marx Hubbard, Barnet, Bain, Joan Borysenko, and Barbara Fields. Awesome, just totally enjoyed the hour, and I know our viewers have too. Thank you so much. I also want to thank all of those who are participating in Global Oneness Day and who are viewing on the Amplifield platform by phone, webcast, and replay. Thanks also to our Global Oneness Day co-creators, all of the speakers that freely are giving of their time, the referral partners and financial sponsors. This is our 8th year celebrating Global Oneness Day, and we've grown our number of registrations and viewers each year. Thank you to each of you for helping Global Oneness Day become our Earth Day for an awakened humanity. Replays are available for free for 48 hours. Of course, this program is free. And if you didn't take notes and would like to carefully review the discussion, you can order MP3s and digital transcripts on the upgrade page on the Global Oneness Day site. For a limited time, there's a $100 summit discount. Also, as Barbara Marx Hubbard was mentioning, to kind of create Global Oneness Day year-round, she and Humanities Team have created a 52-week call to action that we've named Awaken the New Species Within You. It begins on Tuesday, November 7th, and creates a year-round process to authentically live as one using the process that Barbara Marx Hubbard created to fully awaken herself. To learn more about both of these programs, go to globalonenesssummit.org. Next up is Healing Sounds with Jonathan Goldman, and then a Global Oneness Day blessing with Pierre Prodervan. You definitely want to stay tuned for this program. Before we begin, we're going to be silent for 10 seconds to center ourselves in oneness with the divine and each other. We call this a oneness moment. We're going to begin our oneness moment now.